Welcome to Real Estate Real Connections. I'm Julie Miller. What in the world is title insurance and why do you need it? Join us for an exclusive interview with Senior Partner of Metropolitan Title, David Smessaert. Dave, thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
I think with the real estate transaction, often title insurance is the most, or I should say least understood part of the entire process. So can you please tell us, what is title insurance?
Sure. Title insurance, every time you say insurance, you start to think about what can go wrong and how does it fix what went wrong. And with that as a start, it is a lot different. So normally you say, I buy car insurance, you're waiting for the accident to happen. That's true insurance. I bought health insurance, I'm waiting for something to happen. Where title insurance is a lot different. It almost would be better to be called assurance versus insurance. Mm-hmm. So you have a public record that tells you who owns property and how. It's a moving set of documents. There's not one document like a car title that says I own it. There's not one way for someone to put a lien on a piece of property. And so really what happens is a buyer wants to go buy a house, or a commercial company wants to buy a piece of property. At some point in time in the process, they're going to have to transfer that title. It's an event in the time or the history of that property. And at that point in time, we go and take a look and say, based on the historical record, here's who owns it, and here's what needs to be cleaned up for the new buyer to have clear title to that property. People talk about that. How do I get clear title? And this is the process that does that for you. For decades, if over 100 years, this was handled with just an abstract. There was no insurance component to it. So the trip up was, as things became more complicated, there was a mistake and there was nobody there to take care of the mistake. So they said, okay, we need to get this right most of the time, if not all of the time. Your insurance, you need to have claims, but really the goal is to have as few as possible, because the money spent on the premium is spent actually clearing up title to transfer. But when there's a mistake, there is a policy for that buyer to go back on it and get the mistake fixed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And why is it important to me as a buyer? Why do I need to have this title insurance?
Because it's probably the biggest investment of your life. And if somebody makes a mistake and it doesn't get taken care of, the loss would fall to you. Or you would be responsible for trying to get it cleaned up and paying the attorney's fees. There's two components to a title insurance policy. And the first thing that we say is the duty to defend is higher than the duty to pay the claim. So if you come to me and have a claim and you say, hey, I have a problem with this, and you're probably right, and you're going to end up with what you wanted. You're going to end up with your home. You're going to end up with your mortgage on it. You're going to end up with the property you thought you were going to end up with. You might have a fight along the way where you have to get it taken care of. And I'll share a funny little story. We had a real situation where a property sold. We insured the buyer going in. And between the time that the seller moved out and the buyer moved in, the neighbor started pretending like he owned the property. He started mowing the property. They have it all on camera. Started mowing the property, sent his kids over to play basketball in the side lot. And then he ultimately filed a lawsuit to say, well, I openly and notoriously and adversely used this property, and I'm going to take ownership of 20 feet of your land by adverse possession, which is a thing in the law that you can do. So these people are sitting there saying, oh, how does this happen? And what do we do? So that claim got filed. That particular situation got addressed. They got attorneys to defend. The duty to defend is greater than the duty to pay the claim. So we defended title. We were able to prove that, no, this person is just trying to do a little land grab here. But it was, not a big claim for us. But if they had to come up with $20,000 or $25,000 of legal fees right after they got done, they wouldn't have been too happy about it. So we stepped in, we took care of that. We did win, which is nice. You don't always win, but you win a lot of the time and set things back to where they're supposed to be. And they got the value of the policy for that. So that would be an example of why do you need it, or what happens when you get to that point.
That's so interesting. I think stories like that can help people resonate with the importance of title insurance and why they need it. So can you talk to us a little bit about who pays for the title insurance?
It's negotiable. So there's always one policy involved in a transaction. And we're talking, really when you have a buyer and a seller, someone who's, buying their first property or their 10th property, whatever it is. So there's typically an owner's policy there. That policy insures the new owner of the property. If they get a mortgage, they're going to get a policy for the lender. The lender gets a separate policy that insures their mortgage against defects in title, so that if something happens and they have to foreclose, or if something happens and they can't get paid back and they have to sell that property, that a title defect won't stop them from getting their value back from the collateral. So there's two policies. In our market, typically the seller pays for an owner's policy because it's their obligation to prove good title. So they say, look, you warranted title to me. Your contract says you're going to give me good title. Prove to me that you have it. And they used to prove it with an abstract, but now they prove it by paying for the policy. Doesn't have to happen that way, but that's how it typically happens. And usually if there's a mortgage and a mortgage policy, because the buyer needs the mortgage to buy the property, the buyer would pay for the cost of that particular policy.
So can you talk a little bit about at closing, when we're signing a settlement statement, oftentimes there are a lot of questions about sellers, usually sellers saying, wait, it says right here, this is optional. I don't want to pay for this. So can you touch on that?
Yeah, in 2015, when they redid the disclosure statements that people sign at closing, and the whole process was post financial crisis, supposed to make this simpler and more understandable for the consumer. And as usually, we end up with a 6-page government form that is more complicated by far than just a traditional settlement statement. And they argued about that because they're saying, well, if a buyer gets a loan and the lender gets a policy, won't they kind of be covered with that? And the answer is no, they wouldn't be covered with that. But that was just one of the things that the federal government wanted to be able to say, you don't have to do this. You don't have to. But again, you're putting $200,000, $250,000, $300,000 of your own money at risk if you don't know for a fact that that title is clear. And at the end of the day, the way the markets work is you're the buyer, you're going to be the one who's insured. You're having the seller provide that to you as a sort of a shield against anything they may have done to the property that doesn't get cleaned up. So there's really no reason for that other than that's what you get when government gets involved and starts doing stuff.
Well, thank you for clearing that up. Can you give us an example? I know you talked about one example already, but do you have another example of someone who may file a title insurance claim and kind of what the claims process looks like? Sure. So that first one was an example of where the duty to defend was more important, that they're going to pay attorney's fees. This next one, and I always tell people, you want us to get this right. You're paying majorly for the work that we do to make sure it's right. You pay a one-time premium. It's not every year like a homeowner's policy or an auto policy. You want us to get it right. Sometimes when that policy gets paid, something has gone horribly wrong, and maybe you're not going to get the house, but you're going to get your money back. And we had a case down in Indianapolis where a couple went to Florida for the winter. They rented their house out to somebody. The person they rented it to, back then they didn't have, marketplace, but they sold all their furniture, filed a forged deed, a forged release of mortgage, sold the property, new neighbors moved in, and when they came back from Florida, their house was occupied by these other people. Oh my goodness.
So the buyer of that property turns in their claim for the title insurance. They go ahead and get the claim started. If they get the entire process is done, they prove that it was a forged event. The owner of the house should get their house back, and they did. But the people that bought it, that wanted the house, you couldn't get them the house, but they got over $400,000 back, and all their costs were associated with it, so that they weren't out. And that was one of those terrible examples where it pays. And maybe you didn't get exactly what you want, but it pays. But the process is pretty simple. You file a claim with either the agent or the insurance company, and then they'll review the documents. They get back pretty quick, within usually a week or two. And if there's some litigation started, that litigation calendar will drive when they're going to show up. Because so sometimes claim comes in and they're like, I need to get in this in a day. And they're on it in a day. So they're pretty good about that. And it's a pretty easy process.
Are there any potential negative impacts to someone who may file a title insurance claim?
No.
None at all. So not like homeowners insurance where you're worried about being canceled because this is a one-time premium.
It's a one-time premium and it's insuring an event. So we're not insuring, me, Dave Smessaert, and my driving record. We're not doing that here. It's just a good thing. So
it's a good thing.
The person or their credit or their driving capability or their past house fires, none of that has to do with anything. It has only to do with the status of the public record and the transaction that's in front of them at the moment.
Tell us about the history of Metropolitan Title.
Okay, so if you went to the original Metropolitan Title Company, was started by a gentleman named Ken Lingenfelter up in Howell, Michigan. So it actually started out in Michigan and Southeast Michigan. He was very entrepreneurial. He grew a very large company through organic growth and through acquisition. How did he get to here would be, his first acquisition outside of Michigan was actually York Title and Escrow, the company that I worked at, and the partners of the company that you're familiar with. That was the first company that they bought outside of the state of Michigan, was here. And then I worked with him to do more acquisitions in Indiana, some in Illinois, Kentucky, and he built a very large company. It was the largest agency in the country at the time that he sold to First American. So when he sold to First American, the company kind of got broke up and went a lot of different ways. If you take our history of Metropolitan Title and what we've done with it, the York Title and Escrow Company was in this town since the mid 1800s.
Wow.
The acquisitions that we did for Ken in Indiana, in Lafayette, in Kokomo, Howard County, in Fort Wayne, in Warsaw, were all old style companies with rich histories in their local communities. They also had the oldest title records, and they're not that relevant anymore unless you're doing commercial or railroad work or something that really makes you go back in time. But all of those acquisitions came with that, and we have probably the most extensive collection of those records. So we're a subset of the original Metropolitan Title. When the economy went bad in the 2008 and 9 period, myself and the two other senior partners bought the Indiana operations back. We kept the name. We talked about whether we should change it, and a review of that said, no, you really should keep it. It has some goodwill in the marketplace. It has an excellent history. I will tell you, because I do still talk to Ken Lingenfelter, he's proud of what we're doing. We're the only place left that the name exists.
Oh, wow.
Everywhere else it's gone. And, so that part is kind of exciting and kind of fun. The other thing I think that is very important to us as a company is that, and probably based on our own history, is to keep it locally owned. So we have a very unique way of operating. Many companies, you've got the tiers of people that do work. You've got the management structure that's up there making decisions. I was asked after we bought the company back, what was the most noticeable difference for you when that happened? And I said, for the first time in my life, I went to Thanksgiving dinner not wondering what somebody at 40,000 feet was going to do to me on Monday morning after having 4 days to think about some great new idea that would never work in the marketplace. So the leadership is very active at a ground level. I still look at files. The other partners still work on files. We work on problems. We problem solve. We see what goes on in the place, and we enjoy that. And we think that's important for both the business, for the community, for the team members that work there, and that we continue to build and run a company that operates that way.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time today, and of course your expertise as always. You are a pioneer in this industry, in this market, and I do appreciate your time. If someone wanted to reach you to work with Metropolitan Title, how could they find you?
Find me personally?
Well, find Metropolitan
Find
Title.
Metropolitan. Yeah.
I'm sure you probably don't want to put yourself
The easiest way is to go to the internet, just type in Metropolitan Title of Indiana, and you will get us right away. And then you can call the office and get anybody you want for the most part. So that's
perfect. Well, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
We appreciate you.
All right.
As we wrap up our discussion on title insurance essentials in Indiana, we've uncovered the vital role that title insurance plays in protecting both buyers and sellers in real estate transactions. From understanding the basics to navigating potential claims, it's clear that title insurance is a crucial safeguard for a smooth and secure property transfer process. Remember, being informed about title insurance can save you from unforeseen complications and provide peace of mind in your real estate endeavors. Don't miss out on more expert guidance and real-life stories by subscribing to our channel. Like, share, and spread the knowledge to empower others in their real estate journey. Please visit metropolitantitle.com for more information on escrow, title insurance, and all things real estate. Thank you for tuning in to Real Estate Real Connections. Until next time, stay informed, stay empowered, and stay connected.